And we should be live. I'll just give it a minute to see. Once I can see the numbers. Yeah, I can see the numbers, so we should be live. Let us know in the chat if you can hear me properly. We've got about 9 minutes to go. We're just waiting for everyone to connect. So if anybody was watching this on replay in the next few days or in the next few weeks, if you wanted to skip the hellos and go straight till the beginning of the tour, you could skip the next 8 minutes, to be precise. 8 minutes. Perfect-ish. Good. And Martin is here. Welcome, Martin, from Canada. Let me show you the view. It's a bit grey today, but at least it looks like we might be able to dodge the rain. It was meant to be raining, so if it could last for another hour or so with no rain, that'll be brilliant. And Trish can hear me too, so perfect. Sarah, thank you very much. And Nikki is here. Nice to see you, Nikki. Oh, you used to watch me on Hego. Well, nice to have you back, Carl. Grey days are perfect for cemeteries. That's right, yes. And to be honest, it's better for me as well. It's easier for me to see the chat when it's grey. When it's too bright, sometimes it's hard. As long as it doesn't rain. So we are in West Norwood Cemetery. One of the magnificent 7. With quite a bit of wildlife. I can hear some birds and squirrels everywhere. And hopefully I'll stay awake. I've had a busy week. I had to have a sleepless night on Tuesday night because I was being an extra in a TV show. But I was all night, and then I had to go straight to work on Wednesday morning, and I'm not recovered yet. I'm a bit too old for this, I think. So hopefully my brain is still gonna be able to compute. Your sister-in-law is Carol Cox. Oh, she might be related too. And Laurie is here. Welcome, Laurie. So we've got, let me see, 5 minutes. 5 minutes to go. Let me show you the flowers. We've got some nice flowers here. What TV show? It's not really TV, it's Apple TV. I'm not meant to say, because we're not really meant to talk about it on social media, but let's say it's a fairly famous spy drama on Apple TV. I was actually in season 1 as well. I've never seen it because I've not, I don't have Apple TV. But I just checked the trailer yesterday, and actually my scene is in the trailer. I didn't see me, but yeah. Oh, you also a Cox. Well, you might be all related. I don't think Jane Cox is guilty, by the way, but I'll tell you the story later on. She might have been an accomplice, but I don't think she's the murderer. Nobody knows, though. Let me see how long we've got. 4 minutes to go, 4 minutes. I must start. No. I mean, it was like 200 of us. It was a scene in Piccadilly Circus, so we had to be passerby. Well, many scenes actually. It was all night, but yeah, no. I'm not special. And the one I did years ago was in Paddington Station. If anything, I think there's more chances to actually see me in season 1, because there was a scene where I had to take over the main characters. They were on the platform, so you probably see me running. The other night, it was like so many of us. But yeah. And Katie is here. Welcome, Katie. And Trista is here too. And Tammy, welcome. So we've got a few minutes to go. We're just waiting for everyone to connect. Nice to see so many names I recognize. Your Cox line is from Devon. I don't know where her family was from. She has a lot of connections to Jamaica. She actually inherited in Jamaica and left the country after the drama. But I know she's buried here in Lewisham, so she's probably not from Devon. I can't take you to her grave though, because she's buried. Most of the protagonists of our story have been buried in fairly secret locations because they didn't want anyone to go and attack their graves. It's been a while since you've been on my lives. Well, nice to have you back. I'm not going to be doing too many in the next couple of weeks because I've got a lot of work. But in June I'll be scheduling a bit more, hopefully. Oh, Sweden and Denmark. That's cool. All right, let me see what time it is. 1 minute. 1 minute to go. So, as usual, some of you might remember from the last time we did this tour, the cemetery is closing at 6. So it is now 5 p.m. UK time. So if in an hour you see I'm still inside, you tell me to move my bum, because I don't want to be locked in. We should be okay. I think we should be absolutely fine, but just in case. And let me gracefully stand up because we'll start a bit further down anyway. Yep. Ah! Just fell into a grave. Let me flip this camera around so I can look under my feet. Well, it wasn't a grave, but it was a big... the grounds are not necessarily very stable here because of, all the graves moving and all that. Right, let's see what time it is. Is it time to start? Yes, it is officially 5 p.m. UK time, so it's time to go. Welcome everyone. As usual, you've got the chat. Feel free to use it. Ask me any questions you might have. I might know or I might not know, but I'll try. And if any of you was completely new to me, of course, do say hello in the chat. And let's go. Let's flip this camera around. So we are in West Norwood Cemetery. It was also known as at the time as the Millionaire Cemetery. And Sam is here. Welcome, Sam. Because of the quality of its mausoleum. As you can probably tell from the one across the path here, this is from a gentleman called Edmund Maddick. He is responsible for the creation of the Scala Theatre, which is now a nightclub, the Scala nightclub in King's Cross. And this was his mausoleum. It was meant to be shared with his family, but he was not that popular with his family. So he's actually buried alone. But you can see the size. I mean, it is larger than my room. So you can see the size of those monuments. And hi Barry, nice to see you here. So yeah, that's why it was known as the Millionaire Cemetery. It was the second one of the Magnificent Seven. So if you followed my tours before, you might have heard of the Magnificent Cemeteries, the Magnificent Seven. They had been created to solve the problem of over-burial in central London. You might know at the beginning of the 19th century, those little graveyards around the churches, most of them were completely saturated. Because of the Industrial Revolution and because of all those people that moved into the capital to work, then obviously they died, then there were hardly enough space to bury them. And those little graveyards were saturated, they were smelly. Some of the grave diggers they'll sell you a grave and 6 months later they'll have to open it and cut you into pieces and move you along to have more space. So in 1832, the government introduced an act to open those new burial grounds. The first one was actually the General Cemetery of All Souls of Kensal Green, which is now known as the Kensal Green Cemetery. We have been together as well. There's a video on my channel. This one here is Byzantine, the mausoleum. You can see the style with the dome. Hi, Suzanne. And West Norwood was originally known as the South Metropolitan Cemetery, and it was the second one after Kensal Green. Now let me show you one of the most intriguing monuments here. It might remind you of a beauty spot in the UK. Look at this one. Some of you might remember. What does it remind you of? What type of monument do you think that looks like? This large one in the middle. It is the grave of John Britton. He was a writer. He wrote about the beauty of wheelchair and the beauty of England in general. So what does it look like? Let me know in the chat. Exactly, Tish. It looks like one of the monolites of Stonehenge. So that's what they wanted it to look like because he actually wrote about Stonehenge and those interesting places. Now let me show you my favorite monument in here. It is for a gentleman that was a banker. He was the director of the Westminster and Citibank. It was a forerunner for NatWest. And well done, Julie. His name is James William Gilbert. And it is my favorite because if I zoom in, you might see a little squirrel there. Squirrels are, of course, a great symbol of banking because, you know, they bank their nuts away for later. And the bank I was banking with in France, they have a squirrel in their logo. That's why I was banking with them, of course. And he not only was he the director of a bank that is now NatWest, but he also wrote a lot about banking. He is responsible for the spelling difference. You know, in Northern America, a check, you spell it check, I mean C-H-E-C-K. In the UK, we spell it C-H-E-Q-U-E. well, we spell it the French way. I can't spell anything. I'm dyslexic, but we spell it the French way. It's because of him, because he wrote a lot about banking, and he actually spelled it Q-U-E. So yeah, it's his fault if we spell it differently. Anyway, time exactly. Thank you, Suzanne. Anyway, time to tell you about my favorite person, not my favorite person, I cannot say that, but the most intriguing person that I know of buried here. Because I'm sure there are a lot of other very intriguing people I don't know of. But one of the most interesting cases here is a murder mystery. It is the case of Charles Bravo. But before to tell you about Charles, I need to tell you about his wife, Florence. Florence was from a family from high society. They were originally based in Australia, the Campbell family. She was, well, like any young girl of high society, she was seen almost like an asset, you know. I'm not going to say that she had to go through an arranged wedding, but almost, you know, she had to marry proper. She had to marry a gentleman into money, basically. And her family was fairly quickly satisfied because she did meet a young man called Alexander that was very rich. So that was the perfect match. They did marry, but very quickly Alexander turned up to be violent. He was in the Grenadier Guards. You know, those are the soldiers that guard the royal palaces, you know, with the bearskin hat and the red tunic. Yeah, I love the color of this tree. And Florence kind of wanted him to leave the army because he was often away. And she wanted to start a family. And when he left the army, he struggled to find a purpose in his own life. And he got into alcohol. He became extremely violent with Florence. And you know, at the time you couldn't divorce. A lady alone could not divorce. Like, even adultery was not enough for a lady to get a divorce. You'd have to have bestiality or another major incident. So, and her family anyway, they wanted her to make it work. So they pushed her to get back with Alexander, and she fell into depression. She tried to escape from him. You know, she would spend as much time as she could in Brighton or away from him. And, you know, at the time, ladies' issues were often seen as ladies' issues, and that was it, you know. And eventually, her family agreed for her to go into some kind of a retreat at the Welsh border that was managed by a famous doctor at the time, James Gully. He was into what was poison. Well, Suzanne, actually, we're getting there. We're getting into poison soon. James Gully was famous. He was a bit of a different doctor. He was into hydrotherapy, which was very new at the time. And he treated ladies like if they were important. It might be weird, but yeah, most physicians at the time wouldn't really consider ladies' issues. They were just, you know, ladies' issues. And Gully actually believed that there was a bit too much pressure on ladies to be the perfect housewives and all that. And as she went into that retreat, Dr. Gully made her feel very well, a bit too well. They started to have an affair. Now, Gully was actually over 30 years her senior. And he was married, so they were both married. She's still with Alexander, and Gully, well, Gully's wife was 14 years older than him, and she was living in some kind of a home. So he lived like a relative bachelor, but he was still very much married. And if anyone had heard of the affair at the time, it would have been a major scandal. And well, eventually she left the therapy center, and they did not stop the affair. Gully came to visit her quite often, but at that point, her husband Alexander died. At the time, they didn't see anything suspicious into his death. They didn't even live together. He was living with his mistress. He died of probably alcohol poisoning, but he did not have time to change his will. So actually, all his fortune went towards Florence. So at a fairly young age, she became extremely rich. So that allowed her to buy a home in Balham, the priory. And she actually hired a lot of servants, a coachman, a cook, a few servants, and a lady of company called Jane Cox. When I say a lady of company, it's not what you think. It's basically a friend. It's a servant that would be with you. Nothing sexual. Well, we don't know, but officially nothing sexual. And Jane and Florence became very good friends. She became almost like a surrogate mother to Florence, really. She was a bit older. And at that point, Florence is still seeing Dr. Gully. Once at the priory, one of the servants entered the bedroom when they were at it on the bed. Florence quickly dressed up, and she actually followed the young servant she bribed her into silence. Because really, at the time, ladies, if a lady was having sex out of wedlocks, she would very quickly become a loose woman, A loose woman was a woman that was not wearing a corset. Or they would also call it a gay woman. Gay at the time often meant more like promiscuous, really. And, well, then she went for a weekend away to visit some friends in Surrey, a couple of friends that were lawyers. And of course, Dr. Gully came to visit. And, well, the host eventually opened the parlor when he found Dr. Gully and Florence having sex on the sofa. So, of course, that was a major scandal. All the high society heard about the affair. Florence's reputation was tarnished. She decided to end the affair, but at that moment she found herself pregnant by Dr. Gully. The decision of having an abortion was made by society, really. And Dr. Gully performed an illegal abortion on Florence. That worked. She didn't have the baby, but she felt really unwell. It took her a long time to feel any better. And she decided to end the affair, but she did tell Dr. Gully that she loved him and that one day maybe, once his wife maybe would be dead. So they stayed, in hope, let's say. And at that point, Jane, that is very fond of Florence, and the two of them have become very good friends, she decided to help Florence. She decided to engineer a meeting between Florence and a young man called Charles Bravo. She knew Bravo from Jamaica. She knew the family. And they met and they clicked. They very quickly became a couple, and they very quickly decided to marry. It was an interesting marriage, really, because, well, Florence wanted a whitewash. She wanted to gain back her reputation. She wanted to go back into polite society. And, well, Bravo wanted money. He was a lawyer, but he was in debt. He was trying to get into parliament, but he had no money. And before to marry him, Florence decided to let him know about the affair, about the abortion. She wanted him to know that her reputation had been tarnished, because she didn't want him to find out later on. And bear with me, I'm going to have to go quite slow over here, because I have to step on grave and uneven grounds and pieces of headstones. Sorry, Elizabeth. I'm stepping on a lady's grave, and I know she's called Elizabeth because I had to step on her grave before. Anyway, so when you do come and visit the Magnificent Seven, do not know what I'm doing. It's not recommended to go off the beaten path because it's well, it can be a bit dangerous. Sometimes the floor actually collapses, the ground. Anyway, so yeah, he was after her money. She did tell him about the affair, and he was like, you know what, I've got to be honest with you as well. I had an illegitimate son in the Midlands, so I've been having to supply for him as well. And so the two of them decided that they still wanted to marry. The marriage was probably pushed because, well, she got pregnant. To be honest, he probably pushed her into marriage, getting her pregnant, because, of course, she couldn't refuse herself to him because she had been giving herself to another man before. So, she couldn't really say, oh, I'm waiting for marriage. And so they married before the baby came. Unfortunately, the baby never came. She had a miscarriage. And she felt extremely unwell after the miscarriage. She decided to sleep in a different bedroom for the time being until she recovered, until Jane Cox brought her back to life, really. And, well, we never really know what happens in a couple, really, but from our medical records, we also know that, well, he was a bit violent in the bedroom. He was basically forcing her into anal sex. But at the time, you could do whatever you wanted to your wife, That was, in Victorian times, once you were married, you were married. And she probably did not want to be pregnant again. She had nearly lost her life twice, but Charles wanted a Charles II. He actually joked about it. He actually called his future son Charles II. So there he is. This is Charles Delaunay Turner Bravo. So quickly after that, she fell pregnant again, and again another miscarriage. So she really tried to stay away from him. She didn't want to get pregnant again, probably to save her life. She probably didn't know if she could handle another one. But Charles did want a son. Look at the graves. You can see how unstable it is. They've all moved. So yeah, one day Charles left on his horse. His horse actually bolted, and he was running with Charles on his back, but out of control for a few kilometers. So when Charles came back to the priory, he was a bit shaken. He was a bit unwell. They had dinner. Florence drank quite a lot at the dinner. Actually, Charles was annoyed with her drinking, and he went to put himself into bed. They still slept in separate rooms at that point because she was still, well, it was actually the last day when she was still officially recovering away from him. He had, well, he probably did have a bit of water that he drank from a jug that was next to his bed on the bedside table. He always did that, apparently. Even people that had been with him at uni, they knew that he always drank water before to go to bed. A few minutes later, he's screaming, "Florence, Florence, hot water, hot water." Now, Florence was drunk. She was sleeping. She could have been faking the sleep, but she was sleeping. And the young maid, Mary Ann, came to assist first. And then she came to tell Florence and Jane Cox that were sleeping in the same bedroom. Although Jane Cox was not sleeping, she was knitting next to the bed. And of course, then everyone was alerted. They decided to call a doctor, but Jane actually called the doctor that lived an hour away. So Florence was like, "No, what are you doing? Let's call Dr. Johnson." So they called the second doctor that lived a bit closer. And At that point, nothing is looking suspicious. I mean, Florence's behavior is very much in line with what one would do, finding a husband very, very unwell. Jane is running around, she's asking the maid to go and get mustard and coffee. That's quite consistent with what one person might do if they suspect they are poisoned. And the doctors arrived. In total, there were actually 6 doctors that came around in the next 55 hours before Charles passed. Charles was in and out of consciousness. He never ever did he scream murder or poison. He did not accuse anyone. That is why some people actually suspected suicide. Florence actually decided to invite, sorry, I'm struggling here. She decided to invite a very famous doctor called William Gull, not to be confused with Dr. Gully. William Gull was the physician of the Queen. You might have heard of him because we might have mentioned him in my Jack the Ripper tour. Years later, people have accused him of potentially being Jack the Ripper. You know, the famous royal conspiracy theory. Probably completely untrue, but yeah, he was accused of being Jack the Ripper. And actually, Sir William Gull was the only one of the 6 physicians that believed that it might be suicide. He believed that Bravo had been so chilled about his own death for about 55 hours in and out of consciousness. Gull actually asked him, "What have you taken? Because this is going to transform into a murder inquiry. So you need to tell us what you've taken." And Bravo said, "Laudanum. I've only taken laudanum." And William Gull was like, "No, laudanum would not have this kind of effect." And Bravo said, "If it's not laudanum, then I don't know what it is." At that point, Jane actually went to see the doctors and she said, "Oh, he said he's taken the poison not to tell Florence." And Dr. Johnson was like, "Why didn't you say that earlier?" And Jane was like, I did. So that was a bit confusing because it looked like she was lying here. She was trying to cover up for something. And quick little pause in the story because we have an interesting grave here. This is Sir Horace Jones. That is a name that you might have heard of. He's a famous architect. It is the gentleman that designed the Tower Bridge. The Tower Bridge, as well as the Leadenhall Market and the Billingsgate Market. So, interesting architect. So, yeah, 55 hours of struggling, and eventually Charles passed away. The doctors could not straight away analyze that Charles had vomited by the window, and she had washed the bowl in which he had vomited. They did analyze the food, but everyone had had the same food. So the common consensus is that the poison must have been in the jug of water that was next to his bed. Although someone would have washed it, because a few hours later, Dr. Johnson actually drank some of that water. The only 2 people that could have washed that jug of water were Jane Cox or Bravo himself. Before to call for help, he might have just washed the jug of water and replaced it with fresh water. Who knows? Of course, you have many different theories. You've got basically suicide, manslaughter, or murder. Little pause in our story again, because this is a beautiful grave here. It is a grave for a gentleman called John Wimble. That is the amazing thing about doing tours in cemeteries. It's that you don't need to remember people's name. It's written on the monument. He was a Victorian sailor, you know, a captain. He was a captain with some of those great commercial ships. Let me go around so you can see the amazing design. he was at sea, I think it's 33 years of his life, with his wife. Usually ladies were not really allowed on the boats, apart from the captain's wife. She was, the captain was allowed if he wanted to hire his wife. Let me show you this one here. So yeah, amazing, amazing grave. That's why the footpath is actually called Ship Lane. It's because of this grave here. Right, now I'm gonna have to get down, hold on, because I've just climbed up. There we go. Up. So yeah, the first theory, it is suicide. Now, Charles did not seem to be depressed by any means. He was actually really proud of his new wife. He was really proud of his new money. He was really proud of the priory. He was also very happy to be in charge of the money because at the time, you know, a man was, once a lady married a man, I mean, all the money was his. Charles was actually, he wanted to be in charge of everything. So he had actually started to fire some of the staff, including Jane Cox. He had dismissed her to save money for the servant wouldn't do. So that was actually a big red flag. You know, Florence and Jane had become so good friends. So you might think that this alone, if she was going to get so much money from an inheritance, as this one here, it belonged to a merchant. The architect here is Edward Middleton Barry. Again, for a second, I'm just going to move away from this area because it looks like the signal is dipping in and out for some reason. A shame it's hidden away. Well, Susan, you know what? It is misbeaten. Oh, it should be better. That's interesting because I didn't have any signal issues here before, but it has to be them. Maybe they didn't want anyone to hear what I was about to say. That's probably why. The London Underground is not the one that actually created it. It was cool. We're back. So yeah, them started here. The River Effra. Henry Tate, you probably have heard of him, is the one responsible for the Tate Museum. So he was a grocer from Liverpool, and he made a fortune with sugar cubes. He basically commercialized the sugar cubes in this country. Before that, sugar was only in bags, so the cubes were much more. With that fortune, he accumulated a massive collection of art. And before his passing, he decided to gift his collection to the nation. So he basically gave his amazing art collection to government. Government actually kind of snubbed him. They were like, oh, thank you, that's very nice of you, but we need the land as well. So Tate was like, all right then. He gave them £80,000 for them to find a piece of land. That was a lot of money at the time. And then government was like, oh, that's very nice of you, but we need a building as well. And then Tate was like, no, that's enough. So they ended up using the site of a former prison in Pimlico for the first Tate, the Millbank prison. And this, the terracotta building, well, mausoleum there, it is Doulton. You might know the Doulton terracotta workshop in Lambeth. So they also supplied for the monument for Henry Tate. Henry Tate was also responsible for a few public free libraries, one here, one in Brixton. I'll try to take you back to Brixton soon. We've not been for ages, so I might schedule a tour in Brixton next month. Anyway, to get back into our murder. So, you've got the suicide theory. some people seem to believe it at the time, maybe because it was convenient. What you'd have to remember is that at the time, suicide was illegal. So, if Charles did take the poison and then lost his nerve and called for Florence and called for hot water, he would have never admitted trying to take his own life, because then he could have been hanged. Because, I mean, suicide was a crime at the time. So that could explain why he was so relaxed about his own death and why he never accused anyone of poisoning him. But he did not really seem to have a motive. He seemed perfectly happy. So who knows? The second possibility, it's actually manslaughter. The poison was tartar emetic. We talked about tartar emetic before when we talked about George Chapman. Would they arrest your corpse? Well, no. If you're dead, I don't think they can. I don't think they can take any actions against you anymore. Anyway, while we're here, let me show you this one. I don't know who the guy is, but we had a few vandals here, and you can see what they've tried to do. They've tried to take the bronze. They tried really hard. They didn't manage, luckily. But yeah, there were a few bronze bits that have been stolen from the cemetery. Through the lockdowns as well, they had a lot of vandalism. Apparently, one was quite bad. They had vandalized a lot of graves, and some body limbs were out and stuff. So I don't understand why anyone would do that. I was chatting to one of the volunteers at Brookwood Cemetery. He was saying that sometimes the skulls go missing. Would you believe there's a black market of human skulls on the dark web? I mean, why would anyone want a skull? Anyway, yeah, back to Bravo. So yeah, he could have taken his own life. Who knows? And some people certainly believed he did, like Sir William Gull. Or manslaughter. Well, manslaughter could have been actually both ways. Tartar emetic was sometimes used in small quantities to stop people drinking alcohol. I know it's mad to imagine today, but the Victorian pharmacy was full of poisons. And some ladies would put a bit of tartar emetic in their husband's drink because it would make them feel unwell and a bit sick. It would slowly put them away from the drinks. Maybe Florence did that to her first husband, Alexander, who knows? Although she was not living with Alexander when he died. So maybe did she do that to Bravo? And maybe that night, because she was drunk, she put a bit too much. But she put 10 times the amount that would have been sufficient to kill him. I mean, I say she, if she did. So could it really be an accident? Some have even imagined that it probably was not even to stop him from drinking, but to stop him from, well, to slow down his libido, basically, because she did not want to fall pregnant again. She did not want to be, I'm sorry, but today we'll call it a rape. Like she wouldn't, she didn't want to be forced into any sex from the back, let's say. So maybe she would have poisoned him to stop his libido. There is some form of evidence that some Victorian ladies might have done that. We are entering the Greek cemetery now. Some have even imagined that it might have been the other way around. It might have been Bravo that was poisoning Florence. And it would make sense because she was getting into alcohol a bit too much. So maybe he was trying to put her away from the drinks. And maybe he drank it accidentally. That would explain why he was so chilled about his own passing, and that would explain why he never accused anyone of suicide, of murder. Did he actually meant to take something else, or laudanum or something else, and he actually took the poison that was for Florence. It is another possibility. And that would explain why he would have washed the water jug and everything. So who knows? So we are now in the Greek part of the cemetery. So those amazing cemeteries, they were not always fully part of the Church of England. You often had a part for dissenters or other religions. And we had a Greek community here, especially in Tulse Hill. A lot of Greek people came after there were some massacres through the Greek War of Independence, against the Ottoman Empire. And some Greek people came around here. One of them had the idea of buying a piece of land here to make a beautiful Greek cemetery. Let me show you my favorite. It's this one here with the mosaic. I'll zoom in a bit so you can see a bit better. Beautiful. I don't know who they are, but beautiful. And let me zoom out. I'll show you the chapel as well, because they've just removed the scaffolding. It's still, they're still doing some refurbishment, but at least we can see a bit of it. So beautiful. It looks like a mini Parthenon, really. Anyway, let's go back out. So if it wasn't suicide, if it wasn't manslaughter, could it be murder? Yes, but if it was, who did it? There were a couple of inquests, by the way. The first inquest was held at the Priory, so in Florence's home. Usually the inquests were held in public places, but Florence was from high society. She probably knew quite a few people. The first inquest concluded open verdict. It turned up that no one was satisfied by this answer. They wanted another inquest. They had a second one. They concluded murder by person or persons unknown. So really, they did not have enough evidence to charge anyone with the murder, but they concluded that he did not do that to himself. Now, if it was indeed murder, we have a few suspects here. The first one is actually Dr. James Gurley. Even Agatha Christie wrote, a lot of writers and journalists have wrote over the years about the murder. Agatha Christie actually believed it was Gurley, because he would have had a grudge against the men that took away the lady he loved. And, Gurley and Jane Cox actually met on the streets 5 times prior to the murder. Officially, they met by coincidence. Oh, little squirrel here. Hey, friend, on the tree. Hey, friend, I've got nuts. Where is he gone? He's out there. So yeah, officially they met by coincidence, but 5 times. And Jane actually told Gurley about the miscarriages, and apparently he gave to her little bottles of medicine for Florence. Those bottles were never to be found anywhere, so we don't know what it was. So it is a possibility, but really, Gurley was a grown man, and he had moved on. Charles did receive a couple of anonymous letters before his passing. They were accusing him of being a gold digger, basically, which, to be honest, he probably was. But that was the nature of marriage at the time. You'd marry for a situation or money, or Look at this monument here. I don't know who they are, but interesting monument. It looks like a rock, really. You can sit on it. Well, I suppose you can. I don't know who they are. And the plot thickens. So it could be Gurley. It could be Gurley and Jane together. It could be Jane alone. At the time, Jane was one of the main suspects, because at the time they probably didn't realize that she was going to come into a bit of money in Jamaica. And, she's the one that potentially lied to the doctors when she said, he's taken the poison, he's told me not to tell Florence. She's probably the one that washed the vomit away on the water jugs. So she did come across as very suspicious. But really, would she have a motive, though? Yes, he had sacked her, but really for murder. And after the inquest, the three main characters, they split up. So although Jane and Florence had such a strong relationship, they never saw each other again. Florence moved to the south coast when she died 2 years later. She had said during the inquest that she was not going to survive this, and she didn't. Little stop in the story while we're here. You might see down there in the distance, we can see the roof of a few buildings. See, I'm going to zoom in a bit. See, those are two-story houses, and the ground level here is at the top of the second floor. Well, this is because it was the area for the pauper's grave. So they were stacking a lot of bodies on top of the other. So the level of the ground is actually raised. So, could it be Florence? Yeah, personally, I don't believe it could be Florence alone, but I don't believe that it's Jane alone. It could be Florence as well, but Florence couldn't have done it alone either, because she didn't really get into that bedroom. So it could have been Florence with Jane's help, definitely, and that's probably what happened. Florence did have a motive, of course. She could have killed him to save her own life, because she probably couldn't face another pregnancy, and he wanted another baby. She had been trapped into marrying him, because she was pregnant, and she didn't want her reputation to be completely tarnished again. That was probably a way to get her freedom back, instead of being forced into some sexual intercourse all the time. Did she, that evening, slip a bit of poison in his water jug? And when he shouted, "Florence, Florence, hot water," did she realize that she was going to need Jane's assistance? Did she confess to Jane? And did Jane panic? Because Jane's behavior was not quite consistent with anyone planning a murder. If she had planned it, they would have tried to have Mary Ann, the other maid, away. So then no one could have heard his screaming. He would have then passed out and died. So it does look like, yes, it could have been Florence. She might have confessed into Jane, and Jane might have done anything she could to protect Florence. And then after the inquest, she might have been extremely upset with her friend because, considering that she dragged her into all of that. And who knows? We will probably never know. Could it be the three of them together? James Gully plus Florence plus Jane. That might be a bit too much, but maybe. We'll never know. There was also a coachman that had been fired. He had been sacked a few weeks earlier by Bravo, and the coachman was drunk in a pub once, and he said he's gonna see what's gonna get him. He doesn't have long to live. Now, the coachman actually was the one that bought the tartar emetic from the pharmacy, but at the time they used it for horses, so it made total sense. And he didn't try to hide it. He had bought it for the priory. And even what he said to the pub landlord about Bravo not having long to live, well, he was actually talking about a dog bite, and he did admit that, yeah, he was upset with Bravo, but he was a very qualified coachman. He actually got a job in Kent a couple of days later, so really he didn't have a strong motive. Oh, hold on, is that the one? Yeah. I was talking about the lost River Ephra earlier. We have a little plaque here. The hidden River Ephra is beneath your feet. So yeah, it's still here. There's actually an interesting story about the River Ephra. Apparently, in early Victorian times, in Brixton, apparently there was a coffin that was spotted going down the River Ephra on the way towards the Thames. So they obviously stopped the coffin. they at the time they used to put not only the name of the buried person, but the name of the cemetery. So there was a little plaque on the coffin that read South Metropolitan Cemetery, which is Great Norwood. Let's try to go out this way. I hope the gate is still open up there. And so they contacted the cemetery. They were like, do you have that grave? Has it been opened? And the cemetery had a look and they said, no, no one has opened the grave. Apparently, it's just because they dug a bit too deep. And the ground was very soft and the coffin had gone down into the River Effra. So no one had opened the grave. The coffin just left on its own in the river. But apparently that's not actually that rare. I have a friend in Poland. She said it happened to her great-grandmother. I was telling her the story and she was like, oh yeah, that happened to my grandmother. They buried her and like 5 or 10 years later, they opened the grave to put the husband. The grandmother was gone. And same, it was the river that was floating underneath. So they don't know where the grandmother is gone now. So apparently it's not that rare. Let's see if the gate is open. Yes, I think so. Anyway, I didn't even tell you why it's called West Norwood. Because of course we are in South London. It is because of the Great Norwood forest. So the forest, I'll show you a map. I have a little illustration here. So it was, the Great Norwood was a huge medieval forest north of Croydon. Some of you might have been to Croydon with me a couple of weeks ago now. So a huge forest, and today we only have the parts in red. So you've got Crystal Palace Park, you've got this cemetery, you've got Nunhead Cemetery. So most of it is gone, but it was a huge medieval forest that was used for timber. And no, I think I have to go the other side. What time is it? Are we stuck? Okay, let's run to the other side. No, we still have 7 minutes. That's not fair. So yeah, great forest. And if you look at the names in South London, you might see Forest Hill, Penge. Penge actually means edge of the forest. Even Denmark Hill. Denmark Hill was named after the Prince of Denmark, Queen Anne's husband, because he used to come and hunt south of Denmark Hill in the Great Norwood. So a lot of the names in South London are actually named after the forest. I hope the other gate is still open. I mean, it definitely says 6 on the official thingy. Otherwise, we're going to have to call the police or the council, or I don't know, because the gate is way too high for me to jump it. And so yeah, the Great Norwood is pretty much all gone. Yes, woo-hoo. We've made it out. The gate is open. And so today, that's why those cemeteries are used as a nature reserve as well, because they are the only part left of the Great Norwood. Now let's go out so you can just take a look at West Norwood and St. Luke's Church. It's quite a busy road because you have it's basically the way down from where I live in Camberwell all the way to Croydon. And straight ahead you might see one of those blocked up windows. So you might remember window tax. In early Victorian times you didn't have much here. The area really developed after the train arrived in Crystal Palace, so in the 1850s. And straight ahead, this is St. Luke's Church. It looks a little bit similar to St. Mark's. You know, we've seen St. Mark's together when we went to Kennington. You know, when I tried a vertical live, we were in Kennington. It's actually the same generation of churches. There are 4 churches known as the Waterloo churches that have been built to celebrate the Napoleonic Wars. So that's one of them. And let's cross over. The building to my right here, this is the library, it's the modern one. But the original one is across the street there. Excuse my finger, but there. That's the old one. So the library was also started by Henry Tate. You didn't expect that to be that busy. Yeah, it's always nice and quiet inside the cemeteries. No one disturb us apart from the dead stealing my signal. But outside, yeah, it's a busy part of town. It's actually quite nice, West Norwood. I wouldn't live here because there's a big hill. So, because I cycle everywhere, it would be quite a bit of work to cycle into central London. The building, let me put my finger again. This is the former fire station there. It's now a theatre. And here is the old public library. The vicar at the church in the 20s was apparently quite funny. He wrote a book that was a caricature of his local parishioner. Let me show you an illustration. It was called Alice in Norwood Land, and he would make fun of all the famous local parishioners. Apparently, a lot of people came back to church because of him. And at some point, there was a falcon that lived in the spire up there, or he nested there at least. They also used the crypt to shelter against Zeppelins through the First World War. Yes, exactly. Thank you, Mr. Tate. There's a bust of Tate in Brixton. I should take you again to Brixton one day. And behind those buildings there, we don't see any of it from here, but there used to be a very large building that was the Jewish orphanage. The Jewish orphanage actually started, I think 1795 in East London, in Myland. So this was the building here. And you might know there was a lot of poverty in the East End, and some of those poor people were from the Jewish community. So they had a big orphanage there, and eventually it became too small, so it moved here in 1866. And a lot of kids were accommodated here. At the time it was a lot of countryside. The hedge has box blight. I'm not sure what you mean, Susan. So yeah, the orphanage was quite large. There's one of the kids is actually left some diaries about what it was like to live here. And apparently one of the best days of the year for them was one day when 60 black taxis, 60 black cabs came to pick them up, and they would take all the kids down to Brighton for a day on the seaside. So a day going into the arcades and going into the sea. So apparently it was the best day of the year for them. Let me show you the high street from here. Why so many orphans during that period? Well, they were called orphans. Often they were not actually orphans. At the time, you know, when parents didn't have enough to raise kids, sometimes they would be taken to an orphanage. So it was not because their parents died. Some of them were dead. You had tuberculosis, you had cholera, but also sometimes it was just so they'd have a decent life and a decent education. Through the Second World War, the building was used by the army, so all the kids were actually fostered. A lot of them went on the south coast, like Worthing, and after the Second World War, they were completely integrated. So they stayed in the families that hosted them. So the orphanage became a little bit redundant. So the building is gone nowadays. But the group became a charity. The Norwood charity still today, they still exist. So they are like the legacy of the orphanage. They deal with kids with learning difficulties, for example. The Queen used to be the patron. It could be Camilla now. So yeah, it's still very much a charity today. Hi Tom, nice to see you here. Right, it's gonna be the end of the tour. Let me show you my face again and let me know if you have any questions before we go. If not, thank you very much for coming today. I'm glad we didn't have the rain. We did have a few ghosts stealing my signal, but luckily that didn't last for long. Thanks everyone, thanks Herbie, thanks Sue, thanks Julie. If any of you left me a little tip on PayPal or buy me a coffee, thank you very much, or thank you very much in advance. It's thanks to your generosity that I can keep doing research for new tours and spend time creating them. Thanks Lethargy, thanks Tish. And if you want to see a bit more of me, I think it's on the 2nd that we're heading to Trafalgar Square. So we've got a Monopoly tour coming up, and hopefully I'll be able to schedule some more soon, probably for June. But yeah, I want to take you to Brixton, I want to take you to Peterborough as well. So that's something to look forward to in June. And of course, if any of you were completely new to me and you got hooked, do subscribe to make sure you don't miss the next tours, I should say, because those lives are quite easy to miss. So the best way not to miss them is to subscribe and put a little hit the little bell. Thank you, Madame Z. And I'll see you in Trafalgar Square. I should also be scheduling another Ask Me Anything session, because last time I did one in January, I skipped a few questions accidentally. So I should be doing one more at some point. That'll be fun. Anyway, thank you for coming today. Keep YouTubing, and hopefully I'll see most of you in Trafalgar Square. Yes, Susan, that's absolutely right. Hitting the thumbs up also help. And also remember that YouTube is a platform that works with engagement. So, you know, it's always nice to have a little comment under the video, like you would at the time of Hego. You know, you used to leave reviews. So, so if you ever have time to leave a little comment under the live, under the video, that's always useful. Anyway, thank you guys. See you soon. Have a great evening or a great morning, whatever time it is for you. And I'll see you soon. Bye bye.